So there is some interesting news coming out of Canada-China relationships that Mark Carney was able to secure and congratulating himself, patting himself on the back that he was able to score this massive trade deal as an FU the United States, that we scored a deal with China in order to import their EVs and they collect our canola oil and we're able to manage because now we got this economic superpower on our hands. Here's This is very interesting that a lot of people have a mixed reaction to this. So let's get into this story here from the BBC saying China confirms visa-free travel for the UK and Canadian nationals. So this is now allowing, because of this trade partnership that we got now, so now Canadians and people in the UK can go travel to China without having to deal with visas. But watch where this goes. This gets very kind of interesting. UK and Canadian nationals will be able to travel to mainland China for up to 30 days without a visa from February 17th. China's foreign ministry said visa-free entry would be only permitted for tourism, business, or visits to family and friends, with the policy set to stay in effect initially until December 31st. It follows Prime Minister Sir Starmer. Oh, that's officials' visit to China last month, where he and Chinese President Xi Jinping agreed travel rules must be relaxed. Sir Keir said the agreement would make it easier for businesses to expand into China, though critics say Downing Street's push to reset relations with Beijing overlooks human rights and national security concerns. Announcing the policy start date on Sunday, China's foreign ministry said that the scheme would further facilitate people to people exchanges between China and other countries. The move brings rules for UK and Canada passport holders into line with 50 other countries, including France, Germany, Italy, Australia, and Japan. Hundreds of thousands of British people could potentially benefit from the change, with around 620,000 traveling to China in 2024, according to the Office for National Statistics. During his official visit to China in January, Sir Keir said British businesses had been crying out for ways to grow their footprints in China. Xi and Sir Keir, I'm sick of calling him Sir Keir. Like, honestly, they just knight whoever. Also agreed to deepen trade relations in services, healthcare, green technology, and finance, though no sweeping trade-free agreement was announced. The visit was made first by British Prime Minister since Theresa May in 2018, was criticized by some opposition figures. Shortly before heading to China, Sir Keir's government approved plans for a major new Chinese embassy in central London, despite opponents claiming it could be used as a base for spying and pose security risks. Well, we all know that a lot of countries have known to spy on people. Like, we need to get out of the mindset that China is the only one capable of spying of other nations, how they're, gathering all this information, because we know the United States does the same thing. We know that Canada does the same thing. We know that MI6, CIA, NSA, all these, Mossad, Israel, we know all these places that are compiling data on the regular to oppress and manipulate people. We live in a mass surveillance world. So to say this is only a China initiation because they took the first plunge is kind of ridiculous, considering the fact that this dates back to the WEF. This dates back to the formations of the Bilderberg meeting. Remember those Bilderbergs? And so many other, organizations, top NGOs and top aristocrat rulers that came in and came up with these schematics. They came up with the idea of surveillance and spying on people, and how we need this technology that instead of individual beings, you're now just a computer code. You're just an algorithm. You're just a set of numbers on a database. So, a lot of people have mixed reactions to this. There are some benefits. There are some bad takes of this. I can't really say for sure how, beneficial this is because this is the first time we ever really seen this happen. And I will say that, making it does make it easier for people to travel to the destination of China. I will say that the reason why visas exist and why they've always exist is so we have a system in place mathematically knowing who's in our country and who's not in our country. That's the reason why we have, visas. And that's why, for example, here in Canada, you have student visas so that they're there. They have the permission granted by the government, by officials, that they're allowed to reside in Canada for student purposes, for going to school, for education, or if you're for a temporary foreign worker, you're there for working. But you have that visa purposely because if you have an expired visa or you're not there for the granted permission of work or being a student, then you have to be deported. You have to be kicked out because otherwise, why are you here? Why are you extending our circumstances and putting a burn on us? That's why visas exist. So, it's hard to really fathom the good and bad and ugly of this, but that's what they're addressing here. Here's Sky News reporting on this.
Breaking news coming from China now. The Chinese and UK governments have confirmed that there will be visa-free travel for Britons visiting China for under 30 days. There's a few other lines about services as well, going on to say that the UK and China will conduct a feasibility study to explore whether to enter negotiations towards a bilateral services agreement, adding in addition to that they will launch a new partnership to expand the UK's world-leading services sector in China. And if agreed, it would lead to the establishment of clear and legally binding rules for UK firms doing business in China. Like I say, we're also hearing that China has confirmed visa-free travel for Britons visiting the country for under 30 days.
So they're saying that it's beneficial for businesses, that it's going to expand a lot of the UK markets. Of course, Mark Carney kind of tuning the same horn here. Here he is tweeting this out saying, "We're renewing Canada's relationship with China. As part of our new strategic partnership, China is granting visa-free travel for Canadians." And of course, he's snapshotting this. Also saying similar thing, Canadian passport holders can travel to China visa-free starting this week. Again, there's a myriad of circumstances. I don't think that people should be plotting up and down, just, going on the whims of, yay, I don't have to deal with the hassle of visas to go visit China. Like, I think there needs to be a lot more speculation on the direction of where this goes, especially knowing, what businesses are they referring to? Are they referring to, what industries is Keir Starmer, or sorry, Sir Keir Starmer. What a joke that is. What businesses is he referring to that they want to expand into China? And how is that going to represent for the majority of the UK and for the majority of Canada? What's Mark Carney's intention of this? I know they talk about the EV market, which, again, I have said this throughout. It is kind of amazing that they still want to push the EV market in Canada, considering the fact that, we're a country far up in the north. We have cold weather. We have a cold winter pattern that could drop to, minus 30, minus 40 below Celsius. And you expect people to buy an electric vehicle that, if, God forbid, they had to leave out overnight, that their batteries would just erode? I mean, you saw the Teslas that had their batteries plop out in Chicago. So why the hell are we mandating in Canada to buy an electric vehicle? Why is that a mandation? Why would you do that? Like, people are not going to buy a vehicle that they know is going to be crapped out the minute a cold spell hits this country, and it happens frequently. But here's where this gets very interesting, because at the same time, Carney's congratulating himself on the back for doing this partnership, and now we can travel to Canada. The same government is saying that there's high degree of caution to travel to China. Government of Canada. So Mark Carney's government is also saying that people need to exercise a high level of caution when traveling to China. And this was last updated February 16th. So just recently. That because of health and editorial change. So, isn't that kind of interesting? Isn't it kind of interesting? The same government that's applying themselves on the back for you allowing to go to China without the hassle of a visa, which I already gave the explanation of why visas kind of exist and why they are important to a country's sovereignty and position. That we're not, trying to stymie people. We're just saying that if you're coming here for a long circumstance, that there needs to be some sort of gateway or some sort of legal status to prove, okay, you're here for a particular reason and not just to wander the mist and do chaos and deception onto our country. Like, that's the reason why visas exist. The same people are also saying that there's a high level of caution because of health concerns. Well, what health concerns are they talking about? Safety and security. So the Xinjiang, how do you say that? The Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Local authorities have put in place invasive security measures in the, I can't even say that, Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Chinese authorities are increasing detaining ethnic and Muslim minorities in the region without due process. There are reports of extrajudicial internment and forced labor camps. Family members of Canadian citizens with Chinese citizenship have been detained. Notice how they don't mention this. Kind of interesting. You may be at risk of an arbitrary detention if you are familiar or ethnic ties to the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. The situation in the region is tense and accurate information is hard to obtain. Authorities may impose curfews and restrict on short notice. They're also saying about Tibet. Again, same thing. Petty crimes such as pickpocketing, purse snatching, and theft of mobile phones and other electronic devices occurs. So yeah, you might want to hold off congratulating the fact that, hey, honey, maybe we can go to Beijing now. In fact, this sounds more and more like Canada, doesn't it? Fraud. Credit card and ATM fraud occurs. Scams. Telephone scams. Spiked food and drinks. Internet censorship and cybersecurity. Journalism and research. Demonstrations. Road safety. Public transportation. The list goes on and on, folks. So, again, this is why I find this so hilarious, because the government that's congratulating themselves and announcing this majestic win for Canadians that now they can go to China without a visa is also the same government that on their website is putting these restrictions on, saying China is operating in this certain manner. Be very, very cautioned. They don't say that in the publications. They don't say that with the Sky News or BBC or CBC or any of these outlets that are reporting on this. Like, it's so crazy. So here's Kevin Pasidi. He says 19,000 brain-dead liberal sheep likened the post celebrating visa-free travel to China. The same China the Liberal government has travel advisories issued. You can't make this up. Yeah. Isn't that kind of wild? And given the fact that they're talking about Muslims, like, you think the Mark Carney government would be up in arms? That's Islamophobia right there. Oh my God. How dare you, China? How dare you, China? Of course they're not going to do that. Because China is an economic powerhouse. they were able to facilitate and manage their economy in a way that makes them a powerhouse. The same way we could have done that for ourselves, but we didn't. We made things worse. So now we have to bend the knee to people like China, the same country that we outsource jobs to, and China was able to grow their economy, and we were able to liquidate ours. So, just, again, it's just so amazing. It's so amazing. And while people want to immediately point the finger at China for all the wrongdoings, like they're at fault, they're the evil ones, they're the nefarious ones, just keep in mind, it was our businesses, it was our oligarchs, it was us people here in the West that outsourced the jobs. They were the ones that are pushing for jobs to be sent to China because at the time, the Chinese economy was not as booming as it is right now. And if you look at cities in China, I mean, it's phenomenal. It's like Star Trek. It's like they're living in a 23rd century world, whereas we are crumbling within our own existence. So, no doubt Mark Carney is going to flood towards China after, bombing the United States relationship. And who knows what's going to happen with Kuzma, the trade negotiations between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Of course, he's going to go over to China, being the powerhouse that it is. And it's just amazing that this information is still up. And yet they want to congratulate people and say, you can go to China now. Visa free. But by the way, go to the website first and figure out how there's a high risk caution for you to go to China. And here's the National Post. So this is one of the reasons also why they're congratulating is the fact that it's expanding the EV market. And Doug Ford, who has talked extensively about how bad this is, and he is kind of right on a small amount. I'll give credit to that. He is kind of right about the fact that this is going to disrupt the auto sector in this country. But this is also the same Doug Ford that's been pushing for the EV market, has wasted thousands of dollars to build battery plants and whatnot across Ontario, and they have all failed miraculously, whether the company had to foreclose and bankruptcy, or they decided to go elsewhere, or they just don't see a market here. And that's the point I've been making throughout this entirety. Canadians are not obsessed with electric vehicles because they know that an electric vehicle is not going to maintain itself in our cold, harsh winters. Like, it seems so obvious to people. But, according to National Post here, says as Terra sees, more than half of Canadians would buy an EV made in China. They would buy an electric vehicle made in China. And here it is. It says, as Prime Minister Mark Carney lowers tariffs on imports of Chinese electric vehicles, new polling suggests that Canadians are becoming more and more open to buying the cars. More than half of Canadians, 53%, say that knowing an electric vehicle is made in China would have no effect on their purchasing decision, according to a new poll by Nanos Research Group by Bloomberg News. So, I think, and I can't be certain about this, I think that also a factor of the fact of cost. Knowing how much a vehicle made in this country, how costly it is for the labor, for the parts, for everything to manufacture a vehicle, and how costly it is for a consumer to buy a vehicle in this country as compared to China, where you can buy an electric vehicle for under 10,000. That's what they can, certain vehicles you can look at for yourself. That's also, pushing public position on that. That, hey, I don't like the idea of a Chinese vehicle, but as a Canadian that's struggling just to survive, and we showed you about the grocery prices and all that, as a Canadian trying to survive with all these tariffs and inflation and taxation, the fact that our country is just running backwards, upside down to rock bottom. Yeah, I wouldn't mind buying a Chinese made car because the Chinese made car is more affordable. It's more better prone. Like, this is the thing. We should be learning from China's economic boom, not dismantling it, not saying that, oh, well, because it's a communist country that we should completely ignore China. No, China is on the right course with certain things. Obviously, we should not be, dealing with their surveillance or whatnot. Obviously, I support our value to privacy, our value to speech. But China, the reason why they're doing successfully, and the reason why Russia is also another successful country, we need to look at the opportunities that they're taking and consider those options for us. Like, what's making the Russian ruble the top currency of the world? Why is BRICS happening? And maybe it's about time we looked into BRICS. Maybe not joining them, but seeing how these countries are facilitating themselves and how we can have a better economic situation. Because that's what's happening. That's what's happening. That's why China is able to go around the world and facilitate businesses all across. All across. They're not bombing countries. They're not extorting people. They're not shaking fists and waving arms and telling people they have to go this way. They're building business relations. And maybe that's something we got to consider. Instead of going through the imperial paths of destruction and chaos, hoping that countries will surrender their goods to us for just nefarious reasons.